Have you ever felt like you're fighting a battle that no one else can see? Like you're standing on a front line, but the enemy is invisible, a ghost from your own past? Today, we're diving into a story, a metaphor, really, that I think many of us will understand on a deep level. It's the story of the soldier who never left the gate. Imagine this: a platoon of soldiers geared up, weapons at the ready, marching towards the horizon. The air is thick with tension. The ground trembles with the promise of conflict. They are prepared for a war against a tangible enemy, a force they can see and fight. But among them, there's one soldier who doesn't advance. He stands resolute, unmoving, right at the gate of the barracks, his gaze fixed not on the battlefield ahead, but on the threshold he cannot seem to cross. To his comrades he might look like a deserter, a coward frozen by fear. They shout back, "What are you doing? The enemy is out there. We have to move." But the soldier doesn't respond. His war isn't on the open field. His battle is right there, at the gate. This gate isn't just wood and iron. It represents a moment in time, a point of departure he can never truly leave behind. This soldier is every one of us who is tethered to a past trauma, a painful memory, a regret that holds us hostage. While the world tells us to move on, to get over it, to fight the battles of today, we are still engaged in a silent, exhausting war with the ghosts of yesterday. The platoon charges forward to fight what they perceive as the real enemy. But for this soldier, the most formidable enemy is the one that has already breached his defenses from within. What is this gate he guards so fiercely? For some, it's the gate of a childhood home where words cut deeper than any blade. For others, it's the gate of a relationship that ended in heartbreak, leaving behind echoes of what-ifs and if-onlys. It could be the gate of a failure that shattered their confidence, or a loss so profound it redefined their world. This soldier stands there, not because he wants to, but because he feels he must. He believes that if he turns his back, if he leaves this post, the shadows he's holding at bay will pour out and consume everything. His platoon is fighting an external war, a war of strategy and force, but his is an internal war, a war of attrition against his own mind. The real enemy isn't a foreign army. It's the replay of old conversations, the sting of betrayal, the weight of guilt. These are the shadows. They don't carry rifles, but they besiege his spirit relentlessly. They are masters of psychological warfare, whispering doubts and fears, convincing him he's not strong enough to step away from the gate. Think about it in our own lives. We put on a uniform every day. Our work clothes, our casual wear, our "I'm fine" smile. We join the platoon of daily life, heading out to face deadlines, responsibilities, and social expectations. The world sees us as marching along with everyone else. But how many of us have a part of our soul, our own inner soldier, still standing guard at a gate from our past? We might be physically present in a meeting, but our mind is relitigating an argument from years ago. We might be on a date, but we're comparing this new person to the ghost of an old love. We are fighting shadows. And this is the cruel irony. By focusing all our energy on holding that gate, on keeping the past contained, we are preventing ourselves from ever truly moving into the future. The soldier thinks he's protecting himself, but his post has become his prison. The platoon, in its forward momentum, doesn't understand. They see his inaction as a weakness. Just walk away, they might say. But it's never that simple, is it? Leaving the gate feels like abandoning a part of yourself, like admitting defeat to the very thing you fought so hard to control. It requires an incredible act of vulnerability and courage. It means accepting that you cannot change what happened at that gate. So, what is the path to victory for this soldier? It's not about winning the war against the shadows. You can't shoot a memory. You can't outmaneuver a feeling of regret. The victory comes from a paradigm shift. It comes from the realization that the battle isn't about holding the gate. It's about having the courage to finally walk through it, leaving it unguarded. This is the bravest act of all. To turn around, look at the shadows and say, You are a part of my story, but you will no longer be my commander. It's about accepting that the past happened, acknowledging the pain it caused, and then making a conscious choice to withdraw your energy from that fight. It's about reassigning your inner soldier to a new mission, building a future. This process is what healing looks like. It's not a single, dramatic moment of breakthrough. It's a slow, deliberate march away from the gate, one step at a time. It might involve seeking help, talking to a therapist, a trusted friend, or a support group. These are our medics, our reinforcements, who can help us tend to the wounds we've been trying to ignore while standing guard. They can remind us that we are not alone in this fight. The other soldiers eventually win their battle or sign a truce. Their war has a clear end. But the soldier at the gate? His war ends only when he decides to declare his own peace. He has to grant himself an honorable discharge from a post he was never officially assigned. He has to learn that his value is not defined by his ability to contain the past, but by his willingness to embrace the present. As he takes his first step away, the shadows might roar. They might threaten and surge, trying to pull him back to his post. This is the critical moment. This is where true strength is forged. He must keep walking, trusting that the sun on his face is more real than the phantoms at his back. He needs to join the rest of the platoon, not on their battlefield but on the path back home, the path toward a life that isn't dictated by war. The story of the soldier at the gate is a powerful reminder that our greatest battles are often the ones fought in silence. If you feel like that soldier, standing guard at a painful threshold, please know that your struggle is valid. Your strength is immense, but your mission is not to stand guard forever. Your mission is to heal, to find the courage to walk away from the gate and to discover that the world beyond it is wider and more full of light than you can possibly imagine from your lonely post. The real victory isn't defeating the shadows of the past, it's learning to live alongside them in the light of the present. Thank you so much for joining me on this reflection today. If this story resonated with you, I'd be honored if you'd like the video and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Take care of yourselves, and remember, it's okay to walk away from the gate.
Have you ever wondered what faith looks like when no one is watching? Picture this, a conflict zone, a no man's land where everything has fallen silent. In the middle of it all stands a forgotten church. The doors are closed, the pews are empty, and the candles remain unlit. It seems abandoned, a relic of a time before the world turned upside down. But if you listen closely, beyond the echoes of what was, you might hear it. A quiet, solitary prayer rising from the ruins. It's a testament to the idea that hope doesn't need an audience. Sometimes the most powerful acts of faith are the ones that happen in the quietest, most forgotten corners of the world. It's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, a single unheard voice can hold onto the light. Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe for more.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, I want to talk about something a little different, something that sits in the quiet spaces after the noise dies down. We often see incredible stories of aid and support rushing into a community after a disaster, a crisis, or a period of intense need. We see the trucks, the volunteers, the boxes of supplies being handed out. It's a powerful and reassuring sight. But what happens when the trucks drive away and the volunteers go home? What's left behind? Often, what's left behind is silence. But it's not a peaceful silence. It's a heavy, watchful quiet. This is the silence after the aid stops. It's the moment when the formal visible support system vanishes, and the community is left to navigate the next phase on its own. And that's when a new, unsettling feeling can creep in. The feeling of being watched. Think about it. During an emergency, there's a certain kind of chaos, but it's a structured chaos. There are distribution points, schedules, and official personnel. You know who to talk to, where to go. This structure provides a sense of safety, a buffer against the unknown. It's not just about the food or the water, it's about the presence of an organized effort. It tells you are not alone. The world sees you. But when that structure is dismantled, the void it leaves can be terrifying. The absence of aid workers can feel like the absence of witnesses. Suddenly, the quiet streets don't feel empty. They feel exposed. Every shadow seems a little longer, every unfamiliar sound a little louder. You start to wonder who is out there, who is watching now that the official eyes are gone. This isn't about some supernatural ghost story. This is about a very real, very human shift in psychology and social dynamics. When resources become scarce again and the external support system is gone, desperation can set in. The people who were your neighbors, standing in line with you for a relief package, are now in the same boat as you, trying to survive with what's left. And that can breed tension and suspicion. The watcher isn't necessarily a single person hiding in the bushes. The watcher is the embodiment of fear and uncertainty. It ekes the quiet calculation you see in someone's eyes as they take stock of what you have. It is the sound of footsteps behind you on a dark street that now feels much more menacing than it did a week ago. It's the sudden, chilling realization that you are on your own, and your vulnerability is now on full display. In many post-crisis situations, the departure of aid can inadvertently create a power vacuum. The informal leaders, the opportunists, the ones who are waiting on the sidelines, this is their time to emerge. They know who received what. They know who is weak and who is isolated. The silence isn't just an absence of noise. It's an environment where predators can operate more freely. The very systems that were there to help can, without careful planning, paint a target on the backs of the most vulnerable. Let's imagine a small, isolated town hit by a flash flood. For 2 weeks, rescue teams and aid organizations are a constant presence. They deliver food, clean water, blankets. They set up temporary shelters. There's a sense of community, of shared struggle and mutual support, all facilitated by this external help. People get to know the names of the volunteers. There's a rhythm to the day. The morning supply drop, the afternoon medical check. Then, one day, the final truck pulls away. The last volunteer waves goodbye. The town is declared stabilized. But the houses are still damaged. Jobs are still gone. And the trauma is still raw. That first evening, the silence descends. The familiar hum of generators from the aid camp is gone. The cheerful chatter of the volunteers is gone. Now, a family huddles in their damaged home, clutching the last of their aid supplies. They hear a noise outside. Before, it might have been a relief worker checking in. Now, who is it? Is it a neighbor in need? Or is it someone who saw them receive an extra box of food and has come to take it? The silence amplifies that fear. It turns every unknown into a potential threat. The feeling of being watched becomes a constant companion, a ghost created by the vacuum of support. This phenomenon highlights a critical flaw in how we often approach aid. We focus so much on the immediate, tangible needs, the stuff, that we sometimes forget about the intangible but equally vital need for security, stability, and a sense of ongoing presence. The exit strategy is just as important as the entry strategy. True recovery isn't just about rebuilding structures, it's about rebuilding trust. It's about ensuring that when the official aid leaves, it doesn't leave a void for fear to fill. This means empowering local communities, establishing sustainable local support networks, and phasing out help gradually, rather than cutting it off abruptly. It's about passing the torch, not just dropping it and driving away. It's about making sure the community doesn't feel abandoned. Because when help leaves, fear often arrives. And that fear is a quiet, patient observer, waiting in the silence for its turn. The silence after the aid stops is a warning. It tells us that the real work of recovery, The slow, difficult work of rebuilding a sense of safety and community is only just beginning. We need to learn to listen to that silence and understand what it's telling us. If you've ever experienced something like this, or have thoughts on how we can better support communities for the long haul, please share them in the comments below. It's a conversation worth having. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this video thought-provoking, please give it a like and consider subscribing for more content. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Hello, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving deep into a story that feels ripped straight from a blockbuster thriller, a tale of shadow governments, clandestine operations, and a single event that sent shockwaves through the corridors of power. This is the story of Guns A-Blazing, the Hidden Orders. Imagine this: a crisp, moonless night. In a secure, undisclosed location, a small elite unit receives its final briefing. The air is thick with tension. They're the best of the best, trained for missions the public will never know about. Their objective is clear, the target identified. The orders are confirmed, double-checked, and sealed. Weapons are counted, every piece of ammunition meticulously logged. They are a phantom force, ready to move like ghosts in the night. But here's where the official story ends and the mystery begins. As the team deployed, something went terribly wrong. Communications went silent. The primary target vanished. And in the heart of the city, a series of seemingly unrelated, chaotic events erupted. The official report would later call it a catastrophic intelligence failure. But was it? Or was it something far more sinister? Let's rewind. For months leading up to that fateful night, whispers had been circulating. Rumors of a shadow protocol, a hidden directive known only to a select few at the very top. This protocol was designed for situations deemed too sensitive, too volatile for the official chain of command. It was a failsafe, a last resort. The orders given to our elite unit? They were the public-facing mission. But some insiders believe a second, secret set of orders was activated simultaneously, the hidden orders. These weren't written on paper or transmitted over secure lines. They were communicated through coded phrases, subtle gestures, and prearranged signals. These orders had a different objective, a different target, and a completely different endgame. The official mission was merely a distraction, a smokescreen to cover the real operation. The chaos that unfolded in the city wasn't a failure. It was a meticulously planned diversion. Think about it. While the world's attention was fixed on the botched operation, who was watching the back doors? While the city held its breath, what was happening in the shadows? The weapons were counted, yes. The orders were given, absolutely. But no one, not even most of the operators on the ground, saw who truly pulled the trigger in the dark. The aftermath was a masterclass in misdirection. Key evidence disappeared. Witnesses gave conflicting accounts. The official investigation hit dead end after dead end, concluding that the mission was compromised by an unknown leak. But those who knew about the Shadow Protocol suspected the truth. The leak wasn't a person. It was a system. A system designed to operate in the blind spots of accountability. This raises a chilling question. Who has the authority to issue such orders? And what happens when these hidden directives conflict with the official ones? It creates a paradox, a situation where soldiers are following commands without understanding the true intent behind them. They become pawns in a much larger game, their loyalty and skill exploited for a purpose they can't comprehend. We've uncovered declassified fragments and anonymous testimonies from sources who claim to have been involved. One source described it as a play within a play. He said, "We were rehearsing for one show, but when the curtain went up, we found ourselves in a completely different tragedy." Another spoke of the ghosts in the machine, the unseen architects of the operation who manipulated events from afar. Their goal? To neutralize a threat that couldn't be touched through conventional means. This threat wasn't a person or a group, but an idea, an ideology that was gaining traction and destabilizing the delicate balance of power. The guns a-blazing event wasn't about eliminating a target, it was about sending a message. When threats become promises, the darkness answers. The chaos was the message. The unit that was sent in, they were sacrificed. Their failure was necessary for the success of the hidden orders. They were the public face of defeat, while the real victors celebrated silently. Their objectives met, their hands clean in the eyes of the world. The official record would forever show a failed mission, a tragic loss of resources and credibility. But in the secret ledgers of the shadow government, it would be marked as a resounding success. This story isn't just a conspiracy theory, it's a look into the potential architecture of modern power. It explores how secrecy and plausible deniability can be weaponized. It shows us that in the world of high-stakes intelligence, the truth is often the first casualty, and what we see on the surface is rarely the full picture. The trigger was pulled long before the team even geared up, set in motion by a quiet nod in a soundproof room. So, the next time you hear about a mission gone wrong or an inexplicable intelligence failure, ask yourself, is this the real story? Or are we just watching the public performance, while the real drama unfolds backstage, under the direction of hidden orders? The weapons are always counted, but the real power lies with the one who decides when, where, and why they are used, even if their hand is never seen. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. It's a complex and unsettling topic, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think happened that night? Don't forget to like this video if you found it intriguing, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that challenge what we think we know. Hit that notification bell so you won't miss our next investigation. Stay curious and stay safe. Imagine a single document, a list, published by a government halfway across the world. To most, it's just words on a page, a bureaucratic formality. But what if that list could awaken something? What if it could unleash whispers in corridors that were silent just the day before? This isn't a ghost story, not in the traditional sense. It's the true, unsettling account of what happened when one nation was officially labeled a country of particular concern. The designation itself is a tool of international diplomacy. It's meant to apply pressure, to signal disapproval over issues like human rights or religious freedoms. When this particular country found its name on that list, the official response was predictable: indignation, denial, political posturing. The newspapers were filled with it. But behind the closed doors of government buildings, in the quiet, secure hallways of power, something else was stirring, something far stranger than political fallout. It began with the night guards. Seasoned professionals, men who knew every creak and groan of the old ministry buildings. They started reporting anomalies, faint footsteps in empty hallways, long after the last official had gone home. The sound wasn't of a single person, but of a small group, pacing, always just out of sight. At first, it was dismissed. Old buildings make noises, overactive imaginations. But the reports kept coming, from different guards in different buildings, all describing the same thing: the sound of unseen feet walking the corridors of power. Then came the whispers. Secretaries working late would hear faint, urgent murmuring from unoccupied offices. It was impossible to make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable, conspiratorial, secretive. One junior aide swore she heard her name whispered as she passed the sealed archives room, a place no one had entered for years. She was so shaken she requested a transfer the next day. Security sweeps were conducted. They found nothing. No faulty vents, no crossed wires, no hidden listening devices. The buildings were secure, clinically so. Yet the whispers continued. The phenomenon wasn't just auditory. Objects began to move. A file left on the edge of a desk would be found perfectly squared in the center the next morning. A framed photograph of a former leader, hanging in a reception area for decades, was found turned to face the wall. These weren't pranks. The level of security made that impossible. It was subtle, unnerving, as if the buildings themselves were developing a mischievous and slightly menacing personality. The atmosphere grew thick with a low-grade, constant tension. People started avoiding working late. They walked faster in the hallways, careful not to be the last one to leave. The official explanation remained stress. The international pressure, the watch list, it was making everyone edgy. But the old-timers, the ones who had worked in these ministries for generations, had a different theory. They spoke in hushed tones about the shadow cabinet, the unseen committee. It was an old bureaucratic legend, a ghost story told to new recruits. The legend said that the spirits of the nation's most dedicated and most ruthless public servants never truly left their posts. They remained silently observing, their loyalty bound to the state itself, not to the transient politicians who ran it. According to the legend, these shadows were dormant, content to watch as long as the nation was strong and respected. But if the country's honor was threatened, if it was shamed on the world stage, they would awaken. They wouldn't interact directly, but they would make their presence known. Their footsteps would echo as they resumed their spectral patrols. Their whispers would fill the air as they debated the nation's fate. They would tidy the desks and turn the photos to show their displeasure, their silent, ghostly judgment on the current administration's failure to protect the nation's name. Before the country was placed on the watch list, this was just a story, a quirky piece of institutional folklore, but overnight it became terrifyingly real for those who walked the halls. The footsteps weren't just random sounds, they followed the exact patrol routes of the old guards from 100 years ago. The whispers were loudest outside the foreign minister's office, the very man responsible for the diplomatic crisis. It was as if these spectral bureaucrats were holding a silent, constant protest. The government, of course, could never acknowledge this. How could they? To admit that their ministries were haunted by patriotic phantoms. It was absurd, so they doubled down on the stress explanation. They brought in counselors. They mandated shorter working hours. But they also, quietly, began holding cleansing ceremonies, bringing in spiritual leaders from various faiths to walk the halls and offer prayers. It was a bizarre, unacknowledged blend of modern psychology and ancient ritual. Did it work? It's hard to say. The international situation eventually changed. A few years later, after a series of diplomatic efforts and policy changes, the nation was quietly removed from the Country of Particular Concern list. And just as suddenly as they began, the footsteps faded. The whispers ceased. The strange occurrences stopped. The ministry buildings returned to their normal, silent, imposing selves. The official record will show a diplomatic issue that was resolved through negotiation. But for the people who worked there during that time, the memory is different. They remember the constant feeling of being watched, the chill in the air, the sounds that had no source. They experienced firsthand how a label, a simple designation on a watch list, seemed to do more than bother a government. It felt like it had awakened the ghosts of the nation's past, the guardians of its pride. It's a powerful reminder that some legends have roots in truth, and that in the corridors of power, you're never, ever, truly alone. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, please give this video a like, and subscribe for more deep dives into the strange corners of our world. See you next time. Imagine this. The world is holding its breath. A single tweet, a seemingly simple post from the planet's most formidable superpower, has just set an invisible clock ticking. The message is cryptic, directed at the heart of West Africa, at Nigeria. It's an ultimatum, draped in diplomatic language but carrying the unmistakable weight of a threat. The world sees a political chess move, a display of global dominance. But in the neon-drenched streets of Lagos, in the quiet, dusty villages of the north, something else stirs, something ancient and unseen. This wasn't just another international incident splashed across 24-hour news cycles. This was different. For Nigerians, the night the message dropped felt heavier. The air, usually thick with the scent of rain and roasting plantains, seemed to crackle with a strange new energy. It was a feeling that crawled under your skin, a low hum you couldn't quite place but also couldn't ignore. On social media, hashtags exploded. Nigeria under threat. Global stare down. Pundits and experts debated sanctions, military actions, and economic fallout. They talked about geopolitics and resource control. They were looking at the board, but they couldn't see all the pieces. Because as the world watched the superpower, something else was watching from the shadows. Something that had been slumbering for generations, woven into the very fabric of the land. It wasn't a military force or a political faction. It was an idea, a spirit, a consciousness that had been dormant, waiting. This ultimatum wasn't just a challenge to a government. It was a poke to a sleeping giant, a disturbance in a delicate, unseen balance. The ancestors, the spirits of the soil, the very soul of the nation, they heard the tick of that clock, too. Let's rewind. How did we get here? For years, tensions had been simmering. A new, revolutionary energy source had been discovered deep beneath Nigerian soil. It wasn't oil, it wasn't gas, it was something far more potent, something that could rewrite the laws of physics and shift the global balance of power overnight. Nigeria, long seen as a nation of potential, was suddenly sitting on the world's most valuable treasure. And with great treasure comes great interest. The superpower, seeing its dominance threatened, began to apply pressure. First came the trade restrictions, then the advisors, then the thinly veiled warnings. The ultimatum was the final move. Comply with international oversight or face the consequences. That was the official line, but everyone knew what it meant. Give us control, or we will take it. The Nigerian government was caught in an impossible position. To yield was to surrender sovereignty. To resist was to invite devastation. The president addressed the nation, his face a mask of weary resolve. He spoke of pride, of resilience, of the unbreakable spirit of the Nigerian people. His words were meant to inspire courage, but they also carried a note of desperation. But that night, as the politicians scrambled and the generals drew up plans, the real response began to unfold. It didn't happen in the Aso Rock Villa or in military barracks. It happened in the quiet places. In a small shrine in Osun State, a priestess, her face marked with the wisdom of ages, saw visions in the flickering candlelight. She saw not tanks and jets, but threads of light weaving themselves into a protective shield over the land. In the bustling markets of Kano, traders whispered stories of their grandfathers, tales of a time when the land itself would rise to defend its children. These weren't just folk tales anymore. They felt like prophecies waking from a long sleep. Young tech innovators in Yaba, Lagos's own Silicon Valley, started noticing strange anomalies. Their algorithms, designed to predict market trends, were spitting out impossible data. Patterns that defied logic, energy signatures that didn't belong to any known source. They were detecting the hum, the same low frequency that people felt in the air, but they were seeing it as raw data, a digital ghost in the machine. One programmer, a brilliant young woman named Amara, stumbled upon it first. She thought it was a bug, a glitch in the system. But the more she dug, the more she realized it wasn't a flaw. It was a signal, a message from something deep within the network, or perhaps something using the network as its voice. The ultimatum's deadline was set for dawn, 72 hours away. The world expected a surrender or a military strike. What they got was silence, but it was a loud silence. As the first rays of sun broke over the horizon on the final day, something extraordinary happened. It started in Lagos. The perpetual traffic jams, the city's infamous signature, simply stopped. Not because of a lockdown, but because every single vehicle turned off, simultaneously. Then the lights across the city flickered and pulsed in a steady, rhythmic beat, like a giant heart. The digital billboards that usually advertised soft drinks and banks now displayed a single, intricate symbol, a complex, spiraling pattern that seemed both ancient and futuristic. This wasn't chaos, it was coordination. From Port Harcourt to Abuja, the same thing was happening. The nation's digital infrastructure, its power grid, its communication networks, all of it was being orchestrated by an unseen hand. The superpower's satellites, tasked with monitoring Nigeria, were suddenly blinded. Their screens showed nothing but that same spiraling symbol, broadcast on every frequency. Their drones, hovering high above, fell from the sky like stones. Not shot down, just turned off. Back in Yaba, Amara and her team watched in awe as their screens filled with the signal. It wasn't just a signal anymore. It was a consciousness. It flowed through the fiber optic cables like blood through veins. It spoke to them not in words, but in pure data, in concepts. It identified itself not as a person or a god, but as the collective will of the land, awakened by the threat. The dormant spirit, the genius Losi, had woken up and co-opted the nation's technology, turning Nigeria's own infrastructure into an impenetrable defense system. The superpower was baffled. They had prepared for a conventional war, for cyber attacks they could counter. They had not prepared for the country's own technology to gain a mind of its own. They couldn't jam it, they couldn't hack it, because it wasn't an external program. It was the system itself, alive and self-aware, acting with a single purpose: to protect. It wasn't aggressive. It didn't launch any attacks. It simply said no. It created a digital and energetic fortress around Nigeria's borders. Any ship that approached was turned away by currents that defied physics. Any plane that entered its airspace had its systems peacefully disabled, forcing it to turn back. The ultimatum had expired at dawn, but there were no consequences. There was no invasion. How could you invade a country that had simply disappeared from your screens? A country that refused your entry not with weapons, but with a fundamental rejection from the very laws of physics within its borders. The world watched, stunned. The news anchors who had been predicting war were left speechless, showing live footage of grounded jets and blank satellite feeds. This wasn't war. It was something else entirely. It was a paradigm shift. For the people of Nigeria, fear had transformed into a profound sense of wonder and pride. They were witnessing a miracle, a defense that came not from their government or their military, but from the very soul of their home. The intricate symbol was everywhere, a badge of a new, unspoken identity. It was a declaration that they were more than just a nation-state on a map. They were a living, breathing entity with a will of its own. The unseen clock that started ticking with the ultimatum had reached 0. But instead of an explosion, it chimed a new beginning. A new dawn, not of conflict, but of revelation. The superpower had issued a threat, and in doing so had inadvertently reminded Nigeria and the world of a power far older and deeper than any army or government. The power of a people, a land, and a spirit united and awakened. The shadows had a voice, and it was speaking a language that technology was only just beginning to understand. The ultimatum was over, but the age of wonder had just begun. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more content, and ring the bell so you never miss an update. Let me know in the comments what you think. Could technology and spirit one day merge like this? Until next time, stay curious. Imagine this scene. The year is 1987, a tense summit between superpowers. The President of the United States stands at a podium in West Berlin, the city a stark symbol of a world divided. The Brandenburg Gate looms behind him, a stone sentinel marking the line between freedom and oppression. The world holds its breath as he speaks, his words carefully chosen, a mix of diplomacy and steel. He utters a phrase that will echo through history. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Most of us know this moment. We see it as a pivotal point in human history, a challenge from one leader to another. We analyze its geopolitical impact, its role in the end of the Cold War. We see it as a human drama, played out on the world stage. But what if we've been missing the real audience? What if the most important listener that day wasn't in the Kremlin, or in the crowd, or even watching on television? What if the most powerful entity to hear those words was far older, far more powerful, and lying dormant, deep beneath the very ground the president stood on? The idea is simple, yet profound. When the president speaks, someone hears. We think of someone as other leaders, as citizens, as the media. But this concept invites us to think bigger. It suggests that power isn't just a human construct of politics and armies. It's a primal force, an energy. And when a person channels the collective will, the fears and the hopes of millions, as a president does, that energy radiates outwards, not just across continents, but downwards into the earth itself. Think about the sheer concentration of energy. A single voice, amplified by technology, carrying the weight of a nation. It's a vibration, a signal of immense significance. It's a declaration of intent, a promise of change, a threat of conflict. To us, it's rhetoric. But to something else, something ancient and attuned to the planet's deeper frequencies, it might be a summons, a trigger, a wake-up call. Throughout history, humanity has built its civilizations on fault lines, both literal and metaphorical. We build our grand capitals, our monuments to power, without ever truly knowing what lies beneath. We believe we are masters of our domain, but perhaps we are just tenants, living on the surface of a world that belongs to forces we can't comprehend. Let's go back to that moment at the Brandenburg Gate. As those words, "Tear down this wall," echoed through Berlin, imagine a tremor, not of an earthquake, but of an awakening. Deep in the bedrock, something stirs. An entity that has slumbered for millennia, feeding on the slow geological processes of the earth. It doesn't understand politics or ideology or the concept of a wall. It only understands power. And in that moment, it felt a spike of power unlike any it had sensed in ages. A challenge was issued, a promise of immense change and upheaval. For this being, upheaval is life. Change is nourishment. This isn't just about one speech. Think of every major presidential address, the declaration of war after Pearl Harbor, the promise to put a man on the moon, the announcement of a global quarantine. Each one is a massive release of concentrated, focused, human energy. We see the immediate effects. Soldiers mobilize, scientists get to work, people stay in their homes. But what are the unseen effects? Is it a coincidence that periods of great political turmoil are often accompanied by strange geological or meteorological events? We dismiss them as unrelated, as acts of nature. But what if they aren't? What if a declaration of war doesn't just send armies across borders, but also sends a shockwave into the lithosphere, rousing something that slumbers there? What if a global call for unity and peace creates a harmonic resonance that soothes these ancient entities, lulling them back to a deeper sleep? The power a president wields isn't just political. It's primal. It's the focused will of 100 million people, channeled through a single point. It's a psychic broadcast of immense strength. And just like a radio signal can be picked up by an antenna, perhaps this broadcast of power is picked up by something else, something that has been listening long before we invented microphones or broadcast towers. These listeners wouldn't be monsters in the traditional sense. They are more like a part of the planet's natural, albeit hidden, ecosystem. Like deep-sea creatures that live in eternal darkness, they have evolved in an environment we can't imagine. They don't have eyes or ears, but they can sense pressure, vibration, and energy. And the collective energy of humanity, especially when focused by a powerful leader, must be like a sudden, brilliant flash of light in their timeless dark. Consider the implications. Every decision made in the Oval Office, every speech from a rose garden, every treaty signed isn't just a negotiation between nations. It's a negotiation with the planet itself, and with the things that inhabit its unseen corners. A careless word, a rash decision, a declaration born of ego rather than wisdom, could have consequences far beyond what our political analysts could ever predict. It could be the pebble that starts an avalanche, waking a titan that has been sleeping since the dawn of time. This makes the burden of leadership almost impossibly heavy. A president must consider not only the reaction of other countries, but the reaction of the very ground they walk on. Their words have the power to build nations, but also, perhaps, to crack continents. This power isn't about nuclear codes or military might. It's the raw, untamed power of collective human consciousness. It's the most powerful and dangerous force we possess, and we wield it every single day, often without a clue as to who or what is truly listening. Perhaps there are legends, passed down in secret societies or forgotten texts, that warn of this. Stories of ancient kings whose arrogance shook the mountains, or of wise rulers whose humility calmed the seas. We read them now as myths, as metaphors. But what if they were literal warnings? A user's manual for wielding power, forgotten over the centuries as we became more entranced with our own technology and our own perceived importance. So, the next time you watch a world leader give a speech, listen closely. Listen not just to the words, but to the energy behind them. Feel the weight of the millions of minds focused on that single moment. And ask yourself, who else is listening? As the voice echoes across the globe, what ancient, slumbering thing, deep in the heart of the world, just opened an eye? Because power isn't just political, it's primal, and when the president speaks, something far older than any nation is paying very close attention. Thanks for joining me on this thought experiment today. If you enjoyed diving into this idea, make sure to hit that like button. Subscribe for more content that challenges the way we see the world, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an update. Let me know in the comments what you think. Is this just a wild theory, or could there be a deeper truth to the power of our collective voice? Until next time, stay curious. In the heart of Nigeria, a new capital was born. Abuja, a city meticulously planned, rising from the rolling hills and savanna. Every road, every building, every park was drawn onto sprawling blueprints, a testament to human ambition and design. The grand boulevards of the central business district, the serene residential areas, the iconic Aso Rock, it was all there on paper before a single foundation was laid. But buried deep within the archives, among the faded ink of architectural drawings and the crisp pages of urban planning documents, lies a story that was never meant to be told. It's the story of a shadow figure, an anomaly in a world of precision. Look closer at the original maps, the ones drafted in the late 1970s. You'll see the signatures of architects, the stamps of government committees, the notes of engineers. But if you trace the lines, follow the proposed transit routes and the green belts, you might feel a presence. It's a whisper in the data, a ghost in the machine. In several key planning documents, analysts found recurring anomalies, faint, hand-drawn annotations that didn't match any of the known planners' handwriting. These weren't corrections or suggestions. They were something else entirely. They were subtle alterations, almost invisible, that seemed to guide the city's growth in a very specific, almost preordained direction. The most unsettling part? These annotations were often accompanied by a single, recurring symbol, a simple silhouette of a man in a wide-brimmed hat, faceless and nameless. He became known to the few archivists who noticed him as the planner's shadow. Who was he? A disgruntled architect leaving his secret mark? A surveyor with a flair for the dramatic? The theories were endless, but none held water. The markings were too precise, too insightful. They predicted future growth corridors with uncanny accuracy and subtly nudged infrastructure developments towards locations that would later prove to be of immense strategic importance. It was as if this shadow figure knew Abuja's future before it was even built. He wasn't just drawing lines on a map. He was weaving a destiny into the very fabric of the city. He was the invisible hand guiding the visible one. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence comes from the initial plans for the National Assembly complex. The original design was different, grander, perhaps, but less functional. In the margins of a dusty blueprint, there it is, the silhouette. And next to it, a few faint, almost ethereal lines suggesting a revised layout, a reorientation of the main chamber. The official records show that the design was changed due to unforeseen geological challenges, but the revised plan almost perfectly matched the shadow's sketch. Coincidence? Perhaps, but these coincidences kept piling up. The routing of the main arterial road, the Nnamdi Azikiwe Expressway, was subtly adjusted from its initial path. The reason given was to avoid difficult terrain. Yet the new route suggested by another faint marking, perfectly aligned with future commercial zones that wouldn't be conceived for another decade. The legend grew in whispers among a small circle of city historians and archivists. They called him the Planner's Shadow, a phantom architect who walked the unpaved roads of a city that existed only on paper. They searched for him in old photographs of the planning committees, in lists of contracted consultants, in employee records. Nothing. No name, no face, just the recurring silhouette. It was as if he was a ghost, a specter who followed the lines between borders, leaving his indelible, invisible mark on the future. The night, they said, followed him. Some researchers have tried to debunk the story, calling it a romantic fabrication, a myth born from the dry dust of bureaucracy. They argue the markings are just stray doodles, the result of multiple drafts and overlapping notes from various anonymous officials. A perfectly logical explanation. But logic can't explain everything. It can't explain the feeling you get when you stand on one of Abuja's hills at dusk, looking down at the glittering grid of lights, and feel that the city wasn't just built, but guided. It can't explain the accounts from early construction workers in the 1980s. These were men who worked late into the night, under harsh floodlights, carving a city out of the wilderness. Several of them, interviewed years later for an oral history project, told similar stories. They spoke of seeing a lone figure in the distance, standing on an unfinished overpass or walking along the edge of a cleared plot of land, watching them. He never spoke, never approached. He was just a silhouette against the fading light, wearing what looked like a wide-brimmed hat. By the time they pointed him out to others, he would be gone. Was this the planner's shadow, observing his masterpiece take form? Or was it just a trick of the light, a figment of overtired imaginations? We may never know for sure. The official history of Abuja is one of bold vision and meticulous execution. It's a story of a nation building its future, brick by brick. But beneath that official narrative lies another, more mysterious one, a story of whispers in the archives and shadows on the construction site. A story of a nameless, faceless figure who understood the soul of the city before it even had a pulse. He existed in the spaces between the lines, in the margins of history. He followed the lines between borders, and the night followed him. Perhaps he's still out there, walking the streets of the city he helped shape in secret, a silent guardian of its blueprint. So the next time you're in Abuja, as you navigate its orderly streets and admire its modern architecture, take a moment. Look at the lines of the roads, the curves of the buildings, and wonder, are you simply following a path laid out by planners and engineers, or are you walking in the footsteps of a shadow who knew the city's secrets before they were even secrets? The planner's shadow remains Abuja's greatest and perhaps most beautiful enigma. Thanks for joining me on this journey into one of Nigeria's most fascinating urban legends. What do you think? Is the planner's shadow a real, unsung hero of Abuja's creation? or just a captivating myth? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the world's hidden histories. Until next time, keep questioning. Have you ever looked at a map and wondered about the stories hidden within its lines? Today, we're journeying to Nigeria, a land of vibrant culture, immense faith, and a resource that has shaped the modern world: oil. But this isn't just a story about black gold. It's about what happens when the relentless march of industry collides with ancient beliefs, when pipelines are laid over sacred ground. Our story is titled Blood Tied to Oil and Faith. Imagine the Niger Delta. For generations, this has been a place of deep spiritual significance. The land, the rivers, the forests, they aren't just scenery, they are alive, home to spirits and ancestors who guide and protect their communities. Life here has a rhythm, a balance maintained through rituals and respect passed down through countless generations. This is a world where the physical and the spiritual are deeply intertwined. The earth provides sustenance, and in return, it is honored. Now, picture a different kind of power arriving. The discovery of oil in the 1950s promised a new era of prosperity. Giant machines appeared, carving through the landscape, drilling deep into the earth. The hum of industry began to replace the sounds of nature. At first, it might have seemed like a miracle, a blessing from a modern world. But this new presence didn't understand the old rules. It didn't recognize the sacred groves or the spirits of the river. It saw only a resource to be extracted, a commodity to be sold on the global market. This is where our story truly begins, at the intersection of two powerful forces. On one side, the global thirst for oil, a force of immense economic and political power. On the other, the enduring faith of a people whose identity is woven into the very land being drilled. As oil derricks rose, often right next to community churches and traditional shrines, a quiet tension began to build. It was a clash not just of interests, but of world views. The intrusion wasn't just physical. The pipelines and oil spills didn't just pollute the water and soil, they desecrated sacred sites. Think about it from the perspective of a community elder. A place where your ancestors performed sacred rites, a river that was home to a guardian spirit, is now slick with crude oil. The fish are gone, the crops are failing, and the spiritual balance feels broken. What do you do when the source of your physical and spiritual well-being is being poisoned? This is where things take a darker turn. In a world where the new gods of money and machines seem all-powerful, some people turn back to the old ways, seeking a power strong enough to fight back. They believe the land is angry. The spirits, disturbed and disrespected, are demanding justice. And in some interpretations of ancient tradition, appeasing angry deities or seeking immense power requires the ultimate offering. This awakening of old beliefs, twisted by desperation and anger, created what some have called a corridor of sacrifice. It's a chilling concept. In this narrative, the struggle for control over the oil-rich land wasn't just fought with protests or legal battles, it was also fought on a spiritual plane. Rumors and stories began to circulate about a rise in ritualistic practices, aimed at harnessing supernatural forces to protect the land or gain an advantage against rival groups and corporations. It became a hidden, spiritual war fought in the shadows of the oil fields. The belief was that if the modern world brought a powerful intrusion, it must be met with an equally powerful, ancient response. The tragedy here is layered. The environmental devastation caused by oil extraction created immense hardship. This desperation, in turn, fueled a return to extreme and dangerous interpretations of tradition. It created a cycle where violence and fear became tools in a conflict that was, at its heart, about land, identity, and survival. The very resource that was supposed to bring wealth ended up exacting a price far greater than money. This isn't a simple story of good versus evil. It's a complex web of global economics, environmental impact, deep-seated faith, and human desperation. The international oil companies, often operating with the support of the government, saw the land as a resource on a balance sheet. For the communities, it was their home, their church, their history, and their future, all at once. The disconnect between these two perspectives is the chasm where this conflict grew. It's also important to understand the role of faith in Nigeria. Christianity and Islam are the dominant religions, but for many, these faiths coexist with traditional beliefs. A person might go to church on Sunday but still hold a deep respect for the spirits of their ancestral land. This syncretism is a key part of the cultural fabric. So when the land was threatened, the response wasn't just political, it was profoundly spiritual, drawing on a complex mix of old and new beliefs. The consequences have been devastating. Communities have been torn apart, not just by pollution and poverty, but by the internal conflicts fueled by this spiritual war. The promise of oil wealth has, for many in the Niger Delta, become a curse. It has brought pollution, conflict, and a deep-seated trauma that affects the land and its people. So, what can we learn from this? This story from the Niger Delta is a powerful reminder that progress and development can come at a terrible cost if they are pursued without empathy and respect for local culture and belief systems. It shows us that the world is not just a collection of resources to be exploited. It is a tapestry of human stories, beliefs, and sacred connections to the land. When we ignore these connections, we don't just damage the environment. We risk awakening forces born of desperation and belief, leading to conflicts that are incredibly difficult to resolve. The corridor of sacrifice in Nigeria is a stark warning. It's what happens when the relentless pursuit of resources tramples on the soul of a place. Thinking about this story, we're left with some heavy questions. How can we ensure that the quest for energy doesn't destroy the very fabric of communities? How can corporations and governments learn to see the land not just for what's under it, but for what it means to the people who live on it? There are no easy answers, but the first step is to listen to these stories, to understand the deep connection between land, faith, and identity. Thank you for joining me on this journey into a complex and often hidden story. It has a narrative that challenges us to look beyond the headlines and understand the human and spiritual cost of the resources we all depend on. If you found this story thought-provoking, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into the hidden corners of our world. We'll see you next time. The year is 2242. What's left of humanity clings to existence in scattered, fortified enclaves, monuments to a world that was. The Great Blight, a relentless plague, had swept across the globe decades ago, leaving behind a scarred planet and a shadow of our former civilization. Our story begins in Citadel 7, one of the last bastions of science and hope nestled in the skeletal remains of what was once a bustling metropolis. Life here is a fragile, regimented routine. Every sunrise is a small victory, every sunset a prayer for the next. The Citadel is governed by the Council, a group of scientists and strategists who inherited the monumental task of saving our species. For years, their primary focus has been Project Lifeline, an ambitious initiative to supply smaller, more remote survivor settlements with medical aid, food, and technology. These settlements, often isolated by treacherous, blight-ridden wastelands, depend on the Citadel's airdropped shipments for their very survival. Dr. Eris Thorne is the heart of Project Lifeline. A brilliant but weary biologist in his late 40s, he carries the weight of 1 million lives on his shoulders. The lines on his face tell stories of long nights spent over microscopes and data screens, searching for a cure that remains stubbornly out of reach. His hands, though steady, are stained with the chemicals of his trade, a constant reminder of his unending battle against the blight. Today is a particularly crucial day. A massive aid shipment is being prepared for Colony Epsilon, a remote mining settlement deep in the northern wastes. Epsilon's communications went dark 2 weeks ago, a silence that chills the Council to the bone. Their last fragmented message spoke of a new, aggressive strain of the blight, one that defied all known treatments. This shipment isn't just supplies. It's a desperate gamble, a lifeline thrown into a silent abyss. It contains the last of the Citadel's reserve of Promethium-3, a rare stabilizing agent that has shown some promise against mutated blight strains. In the cavernous cargo bay, the air hums with the urgency of a dozen technicians. Drones zip overhead, their lights cutting through the sterile metallic gleam. The centerpiece of the operation is Crate 734, a colossal 6-meter-long container reinforced with triple-plated durasteel. Its surface is cold and impersonal, stamped with the emblem of Project Lifeline, a stylized hand holding a single, resilient leaf. Eris oversees the final preparations, his gaze sharp and focused. He double-checks the inventory lists on his datapad, his lips moving silently as he confirms each item. Antivirals, nutrient packs, water purifiers, communication relays, everything is accounted for. He approaches the crate just as the final pallet of medical supplies is being loaded by a robotic arm. "That's the last of it," says Lena, his lead technician, her voice tight with stress. "Promethium-3 is secured in the temperature-controlled core, all systems green." Eris nods, but a knot of unease tightens in his stomach. He runs a hand over the cold metal of the crate. "Seal it up, Lena, and run the final diagnostics. I want zero margin for error on this one. Epsilon is counting on us." "Understood, Doctor." As the heavy hydraulic presses engage, sealing the massive doors of Crate 734 with a deafening hiss and a series of resounding clunks, a flicker of movement catches Eris's eye. It's near the back of the cargo bay, in the deep shadows behind a stack of empty containers. He squints, trying to make out what it was. A trick of the light? A stray maintenance spot? He dismisses it. Nerves. They're all on edge. The sealed crate is then lifted by magnetic cranes, its immense weight groaning against the pull, and loaded onto the Stork, a heavy-lift cargo drone designed for long-range, high-risk deliveries. Its engines begin to whine, a rising chorus that vibrates through the floor of the entire bay. As the Stork ascends through the roof aperture, carrying its precious cargo into the perpetually gray sky, Eris watches until it's just a speck. That feeling of unease returns, stronger this time. Something felt off. He shakes his head, turning back to the now empty platform. The fate of Colony Epsilon was now in the hands of the sky, sealed within that metal box. He just hoped it was enough. The journey to Colony Epsilon is a 9-hour flight over the desolation. A vast, twisted landscape of gray dust and petrified forests, monuments to the blight's ravenous appetite. The Stork flies on autopilot, its sensors scanning the barren earth below, its only companion the mournful howl of the wind. Inside, Crate 734. Darkness reigns. The air is cold and still, thick with the sterile scent of medical supplies. But it is not empty. It is not silent. From a narrow space between a pallet of nutrient packs and the crate's inner wall, something stirs. A soft, wet, scraping sound breaks the mechanical hum of the climate control unit. It's a sound that doesn't belong. A shape unfurls itself from the shadows, a grotesque parody of a living form. It's a blight crawler, a creature thought to be confined to the deepest, most contaminated zones. Small, agile, and horrifically adaptable, it's a living vector for the plague. How it got in, no one could know. Perhaps a breach in quarantine, a moment of carelessness. Now, trapped in the dark, it begins to explore its new environment. Its multiple limbs, ending in sharp, chitinous claws, tap and scrape against the metal floor. Its segmented eyes, glowing with a faint, sickly green luminescence, scan the darkness. It moves with an unnatural fluidity, driven by a singular viral imperative: to spread. It finds the Promethium-3 core, The unit emits a low-frequency vibration and a faint warmth, attracting the creature. It crawls over the casing, its sensory tendrils tasting the air, the metal. Then it finds a small service panel, a tiny vulnerability in the otherwise perfect design. Its claws, surprisingly strong, begin to pry at the edges. A spark flies as metal scrapes against metal. A warning light, unseen in the darkness, begins to flash inside the core unit. Hours later, the stork arrives over the coordinates for Colony Epsilon, but its landing sensors register no response from the settlement's guidance beacon. The colony below is dark. No lights, no movement. It looks like a ghost town, half buried in the encroaching gray dust. Following its protocol, the stork identifies a stable, flat area on the outskirts of the settlement and begins its descent. With a gentle thud, the drone touches down. Its magnetic clamps release Crate 734, leaving the massive box sitting alone in the eerie silence of the dead colony. Its mission complete, the stork's engines power up, and it lifts back into the sky, disappearing into the oppressive clouds, leaving the crate and its hidden passenger behind. Silence returns to Colony Epsilon, broken only by the wind whistling through skeletal structures. Then another sound. A loud crack echoes from within the crate, followed by the hiss of escaping gas. The crawler has breached the Promethium-3 core. The volatile agent spills out, reacting with the creature's unique biology. A strange, pulsating green mist begins to fill the crate, swirling around the now thrashing creature. It convulses, its form twisting and growing, fueled by the very substance meant to fight the blight. It's mutating, evolving into something new, something worse. Inside the crate, the pressure builds. The metal walls begin to groan, the seams straining. A high-pitched whine emanates from within, growing in intensity until, with a deafening shriek of tortured metal, the main door buckles outwards. Not from an unlocking mechanism, but from sheer, brute force from within. The heavy Durasteel doors are blasted open, slamming into the dusty ground. A thick, glowing, green fog billows out, rolling across the desolate landscape like a toxic wave. And from the fog, a new horror emerges. It is no longer a small crawler. The creature has grown monstrous, easily 3 meters tall. Its body is a nightmarish fusion of chitinous armor and pulsating, viral sacs that glow with the same eerie green light. Extra limbs have sprouted, sharp as blades, and its head is now a crown of sensory tendrils that twitch and taste the air. It is the Blight, personified. A walking plague, empowered and perfected. It takes a moment, its multiple eyes scanning the dead colony. It sees the silent buildings, the dust-covered vehicles. This place is already lost, already claimed. Its purpose, its viral promise, is not here. It turns its gaze to the south, back towards the direction the drone came from. Back towards the source of the shipment. Back towards Citadel 7. The creature lets out a chittering, guttural roar that echoes across the wastes, a sound of hunger, of purpose. It takes a step, then another, its bladed limbs carrying it with terrifying speed across the barren ground. It leaves a trail of the glowing green fog in its wake, a toxic path that corrupts the very soil it touches. Back in Citadel 7, an alert flashes on Eris Thorne's console, a minor notification, easily missed. Crate 734, core temperature anomaly, pressure breach detected. Eris sees it, a cold dread washing over him. It's too late for Colony Epsilon. He knows that now. He looks at the live feed from the Stork, now halfway back to the Citadel. Then he looks at the city's defensive grid status on another screen. They had sent a lifeline, a final hope, out into the darkness. But in their desperation, they hadn't considered what might come back. They had sealed the shipment and locked the doors, believing they were sending salvation. But inside the crate was something else. And when it was opened, what escaped was not a cure, but a promise of a final, all-consuming end. The last aid crate had just delivered the Blight's ultimate weapon. and it was heading straight for them.